The yacht exploded 20 feet behind them, a violent roar that sent debris flying into the dark Pacific waters, and Tessa Owens felt the shockwave slam into her back as she kicked harder toward the distant shadow that might have been land. She had been serving champagne to businessmen in suits 30 minutes ago, smiling politely as they discussed mergers and acquisitions, her cocktail waitress uniform perfectly pressed. Now she was fighting for her life in water so deep she could not think about what lurked below. The fire on what remained of the luxury vessel illuminated the night, casting orange reflections across the waves, and she could see someone else swimming nearby, his strokes powerful and determined. There. His voice cut through the chaos, deep and commanding even in crisis. Island ahead. Keep swimming. Tessa did not waste breath responding. Her arms burned, her legs felt like lead, but terror was an excellent motivator. Behind them, the yacht groaned and began to sink, taking with it the party, the music, the illusion of safety. She had no idea what caused the explosion. One moment she was refilling glasses. The next the world was fire and screaming and cold water swallowing everything. The man swimming beside her matched her pace, occasionally glancing back to make sure she was still moving. She caught glimpses of his face in the firelight, strong jaw set with determination, dark hair plastered to his skull. He was one of the passengers, she thought. One of the wealthy men who had chartered the yacht for some corporate celebration off the coast of the Philippines. The swim felt endless. Her muscles screamed. Salt water burned her throat every time a wave caught her wrong. But gradually, impossibly, the dark shadow ahead took shape. Sand, palm trees, the distinctive silhouette of land. When Tessa's feet finally touched bottom, she nearly sobbed with relief. She stumbled through the shallows, waves pushing her forward until she collapsed on the beach. Sand stuck to her face, her arms, but she had never felt anything so wonderful. Solid ground. She was alive. The man dragged himself onto the beach beside her, coughing up seawater. For several minutes neither of them spoke, just lay there breathing hard, listening to the crackle of flames in the distance as the yacht finished sinking. "Is anyone else coming?" Tessa finally managed, her voice hoarse. He sat up slowly, scanning the dark water. The fire was dying now, the yacht nearly gone. "I don't know. I saw people getting into the lifeboat on the port side before the second explosion hit." Second explosion. Tessa pushed herself up on her elbows. Her whole body shook, adrenaline giving way to shock. The first one was in the engine room. Small. Gave us maybe 3 minutes. He stood, water streaming from his dress pants and what had once been a white button-down shirt. The second one took out the whole stern. Anyone still aboard? He did not finish the sentence. Tessa wrapped her arms around herself. She had worked on that yacht for 6 months, knew the crew, knew the captain. Sweet old Roger, who always made sure she got a lunch break. Maria, who taught her Tagalog phrases. Were they in the lifeboat, or were they gone? We should look for others. The man was already walking down the beach, his posture straight despite everything. Call out. If anyone else made it to shore, they need to know they are not alone. Wait. Tessa forced herself to stand, her legs wobbling. What's your name? He turned back and she saw him properly for the first time. Late 30s, maybe. Striking features, the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers. His eyes were sharp, assessing, the eyes of someone used to being in control. Julian Warner, he said. The name struck her like a physical blow. Julian Warner. She had heard the crew talking about him, the reason they were out here in the first place. Julian Warner, the billionaire who had made his fortune in pharmaceuticals, buying up struggling companies and turning them into giants. He had chartered the yacht for a celebration, something about finalizing a major deal. "I'm Tessa," she said. "I was working the party, I know, you brought me scotch." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Neat, 2 fingers, you remembered without asking. She blinked. In the chaos of the explosion, she had not expected him to remember her. Wealthy passengers rarely did. She was part of the background, like the furniture. They spent the next hour walking the beach, calling out, searching for survivors. The island was small, maybe a quarter-mile across, covered in palm trees and dense vegetation. The beach curved around in a rough circle, white sand gleaming in the moonlight. But they found no one else. By the time they completed the circuit back to where they started, exhaustion was setting in. Tessa's clothes clung to her, cold despite the tropical air. Her feet were cut from stumbling over rocks in the dark. Julian looked equally worn, though he carried himself with the same confident bearing. "We need shelter," he said, scanning the tree line, "and fresh water. Fire if we can manage it. You know how to survive on a deserted island?" The question came out sharper than Tessa intended, fear manifesting as irritation. Julian met her eyes. "No, do you?" "Not remotely." "Then we learn." He started toward the trees. "I saw what looked like a clearing back there, protected from the wind. We should stay together, consolidate our resources." "Resources?" Tessa followed him, too tired to argue. "What resources? We have nothing. We have our minds." Julian pushed through the underbrush, holding branches aside so she could pass. "Intelligence. Problem-solving skills. That counts for something." The clearing was sheltered by a natural rock formation, creating a small cave-like overhang. Not much, but better than sleeping exposed on the beach. Tessa sank down against the rock, every muscle aching. Julian remained standing, his gaze distant. The yacht had emergency beacons. If anyone made it to the lifeboat, rescue teams will be searching by morning. And if they did not, Tessa heard the tremor in her own voice. Then the yacht itself was being tracked. When we do not arrive at our destination, people will notice. They will come looking. He finally sat down, running a hand through his drying hair. "We just need to stay alive until they find us. Stay alive." It sounded so simple. Tessa closed her eyes, letting the exhaustion take her. She would think about survival in the morning. Right now, she just needed to not think at all. She woke to sunlight filtering through the palms and the sound of Julian already moving around. Her body was a symphony of pain, every muscle protesting as she sat up. Her uniform was stiff with dried salt, her hair a tangled disaster. Julian crouched near the edge of the clearing, examining something on the ground. He had removed his dress shirt, wearing only a white undershirt that showed the lean muscles of his shoulders and arms. For a billionaire who spent his days in boardrooms, he was surprisingly fit. "Morning," he said without looking up. "I found water. Small stream about 50 yards inland. We should drink, then figure out food." Tessa's mouth felt like sandpaper. "Lead the way." The stream was barely more than a trickle, flowing from somewhere deeper in the island's interior, but the water was clear and cold. Tessa drank until her stomach hurt, then splashed her face, trying to feel human again. "We need to boil this," Julian said, filling his cupped hands and drinking carefully. "Parasites, bacteria, but for now we do not have a choice." "How do you know that?" Tessa studied him. He did not look like someone who thought about parasites. "I did a medical degree before business school, never practiced, but the information stuck." He straightened, looking around. "We need fire. Standard survival priority, shelter, water, fire, food. You did not practice medicine." Something about that struck Tessa as sad. All that training, unused. Julian's expression closed off. "My father thought it was a waste, not profitable enough. He pushed me toward business, and eventually I saw he was right. I could help more people by funding research than by treating them one at a time." The bitterness in his voice suggested that was not the whole story, but Tessa did not push. They had bigger problems, Fire proved difficult. Julian tried the classic method of rubbing sticks together, while Tessa gathered dry palm fronds and anything else that might burn. After 2 hours of effort, they had nothing but blisters and frustration. "This is insane," Tessa finally said, sitting back hard in the sand. "People have been making fire for thousands of years, and we cannot figure it out." Julian wiped sweat from his forehead, breathing hard. His undershirt was soaked through, and Tessa found herself noticing the way his muscles moved under the fabric before she pushed the thought away. Survival first. Inappropriate attraction to the billionaire could wait. "Different method," he said. "Fire plow. We need a flat piece of wood and a stick." It took another hour, but eventually a tiny ember glowed in the groove Julian had carved. Tessa cupped her hands around it, blowing gently as he added the finest, driest material they had collected. When the first flame caught, they both shouted in triumph, "Fire!" Julian sat back, a genuine smile transforming his face. "We have fire." For a moment, Tessa saw past the billionaire, the businessman, the commanding presence. She saw just a man, relieved and happy about something as simple as creating flame. It made him human in a way nothing else had. They spent the rest of the day establishing a basic camp. Julian proved surprisingly capable with his hands, weaving palm fronds into a rough shelter extension while Tessa foraged along the beach for anything useful. She found pieces of debris from the yacht, a few plastic bottles that washed ashore, a waterlogged seat cushion that could serve as bedding. Food was the next challenge. The island had coconuts, which Julian managed to crack open using rocks, providing both water and meat. Tessa discovered a tide pool full of mussels clinging to rocks, and they roasted them over the fire. "Not exactly the dinner you were serving last night," Julian commented, prying open a steaming mussel. "No Dom Perignon to go with it," Tessa agreed. The food was plain but filling, and she was too hungry to care about the lack of seasoning. They ate in silence for a while, the sun setting over the ocean in streaks of orange and pink. It would have been beautiful if the circumstances were different. "Tell me about yourself," Julian said eventually. "Where are you from?" Tessa hesitated. Her life story was not particularly glamorous. "Oregon originally. Small town outside Portland. I came to the Philippines a year ago looking for adventure, I guess. Waited tables, did some bartending, eventually got the yacht job. Family, my mom. Dad left when I was 10, no siblings." She poked at the fire with a stick. "Mom thinks I am crazy, running around Southeast Asia instead of settling down. What about you?" "New York. My father built the pharmaceutical business from nothing, expected me to take over. I did, expanded it, made billions." He said it matter-of-factly, without pride or shame. "My mother died when I was young. Father passed 2 years ago, no siblings either." "That is lonely," Tessa said softly. Julian looked at her, something flickering in his eyes. "Yes, it is." The days began to blur together. They fell into a routine born of necessity. Wake with the sun. Check the fire, make sure it had not died during the night. Drink from the stream, forage for food, gather firewood. Improve the shelter, search the beach for debris. Keep the signal fire burning on the high point of the island, ready to add green palm fronds if they saw a plane or boat. Tessa learned that Julian was methodical and brilliant, approaching survival like a business problem to be solved. He built a rain catch system using the plastic bottles and seat cushion, designed fish traps from woven palm fronds, mapped the entire island, noting resources and potential dangers. But she also learned he was human. He hated the taste of coconut after the 3rd day. He had a scar on his shoulder from a childhood bike accident. He talked in his sleep sometimes, fragments of conversations about meetings and deals and numbers. Julian, in turn, discovered that Tessa was stronger than she looked. She climbed trees to get coconuts, dove into tide pools for shellfish, kept the fire going through a rainstorm when he was sick from drinking bad water. She had a practical intelligence that complemented his theoretical knowledge. "You are good at this," he told her one evening, watching her efficiently clean the fish they had caught in his traps. "Good at what? Being stranded." Tessa gutted another fish, her hands steady. "Adapting. Most people would fall apart in this situation. You just do what needs to be done." "So do you," she pointed out. "I am used to high-pressure situations. Board meetings, hostile takeovers, million-dollar decisions. But that is all theoretical. This is different. This is life or death." Tessa rinsed her hands in the stream. "Maybe we are both tougher than we thought." By the end of the first week, rescue still had not come. The realization settled over them gradually, a weight that pressed heavier each day. They talked less about when they would be found and more about how to sustain their small camp. One morning, Tessa woke to find Julian already gone. She followed his tracks to the beach, where he stood staring at the horizon. His shoulders were tense, hands clenched at his sides. "Julian," she approached carefully. 7 days, he said quietly. 7 days and nothing. No boats, no planes. The emergency beacons should have brought rescue by now. Tessa stood beside him. "Maybe the currents took us further than they expected. Search areas are huge. Or maybe there were no survivors to trigger the beacons." His voice was flat. "Maybe everyone died in the explosion and we are the only ones left." The thought had occurred to Tessa too, in the dark hours before dawn, but hearing Julian say it made it real. "We do not know that. We do not know anything." He turned to her, and she saw the fear beneath his controlled exterior. "I have spent my entire adult life managing risk, calculating outcomes, controlling variables. But this, I cannot control this. I cannot buy our way out or strategize a solution. We are completely at the mercy of chance." Tessa understood. For someone like Julian, who had built an empire through intelligence and will, helplessness must be terrifying. She reached out and took his hand, surprising them both. "Then we survive on what we can control," she said firmly. "We make this camp better. We find more food sources. We stay healthy and strong so that when rescue comes, we are ready, and we do not give up." Julian's fingers tightened around hers. "When did you become the optimist?" "When I realized you needed one." She smiled, trying to lighten the moment. "Billionaires are not supposed to have existential crises on beaches. It is undignified." That startled a laugh out of him, short but genuine. "I will try to maintain my dignity." They stood there for a moment longer, hands linked, watching the empty ocean. Then Julian squeezed her hand once and let go, his composure settling back into place. "Come on," he said. "Those fish traps need reinforcing." The second week brought new challenges. A storm rolled in, violent and sudden, tearing apart their shelter and nearly extinguishing the fire. They huddled under the rock overhang, soaked and shivering as wind and rain battered the island. Tessa pressed close to Julian for warmth, and she felt him wrap an arm around her shoulders, pulling her against his side. It was purely practical body heat shared in the face of cold rain, but she noticed how solid he felt, how safe. "This is miserable," she shouted over the wind. "Could be worse," Julian shouted back. "How could be alone?" Tessa tilted her head to look at him. Water streamed down his face, his hair plastered to his skull, but his eyes were warm. "You are right. That would be worse." When the storm finally passed, they spent a full day rebuilding. Julian redesigned the shelter with a steeper roof pitch to shed water. Tessa gathered fresh palm fronds and reinforced the walls. They worked in comfortable synchronization, each anticipating what the other needed. "Hand me that vine," Julian said, and Tessa had it ready before he finished speaking. "Hold this steady," Tessa instructed, and Julian was already bracing the support pole. That night, sitting by the rebuilt fire, Tessa realized she had not thought about her old life in days. The yacht job, her plans to travel to Vietnam next, the apartment she shared with 2 other servers in Manila. It all seemed distant, like something that happened to someone else. "What are you thinking about?" Julian poked the fire, sending sparks spiraling up into the night. "How strange this is," Tessa said. 2 weeks ago, we lived in completely different worlds. You were closing billion-dollar deals and I was serving drinks. Now we are here and those differences do not matter at all. Julian was quiet for a long moment. They never really mattered. "Money, status, power, out here none of that means anything. We are just 2 people trying to survive." "Do you miss it?" Tessa asked. "Your life before, parts of it, hot showers, coffee, the internet." He smiled slightly. "But other parts? The endless meetings, the people who only talked to me because I was rich, the constant pressure. I do not miss that." "You must have had someone, though. Girlfriend, fiancé?" Tessa kept her tone casual, but she was curious. "No one serious. Dated occasionally, but my father always said relationships were distractions from building the business. After he died, I realized I had followed his advice so thoroughly that I had no idea how to be with someone." He met her eyes across the fire. "What about you? Nothing serious either?" "A few boyfriends, but I was always moving, always looking for the next adventure. No one ever made me want to stay." Tessa pulled her knees to her chest. "My mom says I have commitment issues. Or maybe you just had not found the right reason to commit," Julian said quietly. Something in his voice made Tessa's heart skip. The firelight played across his features, highlighting the strong lines of his jaw, the intensity in his gaze. When had she started finding him attractive? Was it the 3rd day, when she watched him refuse to give up on making fire? The 5th day, when he dove into rough surf to retrieve a useful piece of debris? Or had it been gradual, a slow recognition that this man was more than his wealth and status? "Tessa," Julian started, then stopped, shaking his head. "Never mind." "What?" She leaned forward. "Nothing. We should sleep. Tomorrow I want to explore the north side more thoroughly. I think there might be fruit trees inland." He was deflecting, changing the subject, and Tessa wondered what he had been about to say. But she let it go, banking the fire for the night. The 3rd week brought a shift in their dynamic, subtle but unmistakable. They touched more often, casual brushes of hands while gathering food, steadying grips when climbing over rocks, sitting closer by the fire. Julian started calling her Tess, the nickname rolling off his tongue naturally. She caught herself watching him work, admiring the competence in his movements, the way he never complained despite the hardships. One afternoon, while checking the fish traps, Julian slipped on wet rocks and went down hard, gashing his leg on a sharp edge. Tessa heard his shout and rushed over, finding him sitting in the shallows, blood streaming from a deep cut on his calf. "Do not move," she ordered, crouching beside him. "Let me see." The cut was ugly, several inches long and deep enough to worry about. Tessa helped him back to camp. Trying to ignore the way his weight against her side made her hyper-aware of every point of contact between their bodies. She cleaned the wound with boiled water, tearing strips from the bottom of her uniform skirt to make bandages. Julian watched her work, his jaw tight with pain. "You should have been a nurse," he said through gritted teeth. "And you should have been a doctor," Tessa replied, tying off the bandage. "We are both living lives we did not quite plan. Maybe we will get a chance to change that. If we ever get off this island." His hand covered hers on his leg. "Thank you, Tess." The use of the nickname, combined with the warmth of his palm on her hand, sent heat rushing through her. Tessa met his eyes and saw her own awareness reflected there. The air between them felt charged, heavy with possibility. "You should rest," she said, her voice coming out huskier than intended. "Keep weight off that leg for a few days." Julian nodded, but he did not let go of her hand. "Tess, I need to tell you something." Her heart hammered. "What?" "These past few weeks, being here with you, I have been happier than I have been in years. Even stranded on an island, fighting to survive, I have felt more alive than I did running my company." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "You make me want to be a better man. Not a richer man or a more successful man, just better." Tessa felt tears prick her eyes. "Julian, I feel the same way. You are not at all who I thought you would be. You are kind and smart, and you work harder than anyone I have ever met. The fact that you are a billionaire is probably the least interesting thing about you." He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "No one has ever said that to me before. Then no one was really seeing you." Julian pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face. "I am seeing you too. Your strength, your resilience, your incredible heart. You are extraordinary, Tess." When he kissed her, soft and tentative, Tessa felt something inside her slot into place. This was what she had been running toward all those years, all those adventures. Not a place, but a person. Not wealth or status, but connection. Real, deep, terrifying connection. She kissed him back, pouring weeks of growing feeling into it. His arms came around her, careful of his injured leg, and she let herself sink into his embrace. The island, the ocean, the uncertain future all fell away. There was just this moment, this man, this unexpected love growing between them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Julian rested his forehead against hers. "We are probably crazy," he murmured, "falling for each other in the middle of a survival situation." "Definitely crazy," Tessa agreed. "But I do not care, neither do I." He kissed her again, deeper this time. They spent the rest of the day close together, talking about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their lives before. Julian told her about his first business deal, how terrified he had been despite projecting confidence. Tessa told him about the time she hitchhiked through Thailand, nearly getting stranded in a monsoon. "You have always been an adventurer," Julian said, running his fingers through her salt-tangled hair. "And you have always been a caretaker," Tessa replied, touching the bandage she had wrapped around his leg. "You just channeled it into business instead of medicine." "Maybe when we get home I will reconsider that," he said thoughtfully. "Fund a hospital, staff it with the best people, actually use that medical degree. I think you would be amazing at that." Tessa snuggled closer, his heartbeat steady under her ear. "What about you? What will you do?" Tessa had not let herself think that far ahead, afraid to jinx their rescue. But now, with Julian's arms around her, the future seemed less frightening. "I do not know. Maybe go back to school. I never finished my degree." "What were you studying?" "Marine biology." "I loved the ocean, wanted to understand it, but money got tight and I dropped out to work." She shrugged against him. "Seemed practical at the time." "You could go back," Julian said. "Finish it. I could help." Tessa stiffened, pulling back to look at him. "I do not want your money, Julian." "I know. That is not what I meant." He chose his words carefully. "But if finances are the only thing standing between you and your dreams, why not remove that obstacle? It is not about charity or me taking care of you. It is about helping someone I care about achieve their goals." The sincerity in his voice made Tessa relax. "Let's survive first, then talk about school. Deal?" He kissed her forehead. "But we are having that conversation." The fourth week brought a comfortable domesticity to their survival. Julian's leg healed slowly, and Tessa took over the more physical tasks without complaint. They slept curled together now, sharing warmth and comfort. They talked for hours, learning each other's minds as thoroughly as they were learning each other's hearts. Julian spoke about the pressure of his father's expectations, how he had spent years trying to earn approval that never came. Tessa shared her fear that she was running from real life instead of living it, always moving to avoid putting down roots. "You are the bravest person I know," Julian told her one night, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "It takes courage to seek new experiences, to refuse to settle." "You are brave too," Tessa said. "You took your father's company and made it your own. That is terrifying." "We are both scared," Julian said. "We are just scared of different things." "What are you scared of now?" Tessa asked. He was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Finally, he said, "Losing this. Losing you. If we get rescued and go back to real life, what if this feeling does not survive? What if you realize you do not actually want to be with a workaholic billionaire who does not know how to turn off his brain?" Tessa propped herself up on one elbow, meeting his eyes in the firelight. "Julian Warner, I am falling in love with you. Not your money, not your status. You, the man who refused to give up on making fire. The man who dives into rough water to grab floating bottles because they might be useful. The man who holds me when I cry about the friends we lost." She touched his face gently. "That man will exist whether we are on this island or in New York City." "I am falling in love with you too," Julian said, his voice rough with emotion. "So much it scares me. I have never felt like this about anyone." "Neither have I," Tessa whispered. They made love for the first time that night, slow and tender on their makeshift bed of woven palm fronds and the salvaged seat cushion. It was not glamorous or comfortable, but it was real, two people connecting in the most fundamental way, affirming life in the face of uncertainty. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Tessa felt more content than she had in her entire life. If someone had told her 2 months ago that she would fall in love with a billionaire on a deserted island, she would have laughed. But here they were, and nothing had ever felt more right. The 5th week began with a discovery. Julian, exploring the far side of the island while his leg finished healing, found a small cave system carved into the volcanic rock. Inside, protected from the elements, were supplies. Old fishing nets, rusted but usable, glass bottles that could hold water. Even a tattered tarp that would improve their shelter significantly. "Someone was here before," Julian said, examining the nets. "These are decades old, but they prove people have been to this island." "Which means it is not as isolated as we thought," Tessa said, hope surging. "Ships must pass near here." They redoubled their signal fire efforts, keeping it burning constantly and adding green fronds at any hint of movement on the horizon. They used the tarp to collect more rainwater, ensuring they had ample supply. The old fishing nets, carefully repaired, brought in larger catches. Life became almost comfortable, which scared Tessa in its own way. She caught herself thinking about staying, about building a real life on this tiny island with Julian. It was insane, but part of her loved the simplicity of their existence. No bills, no bosses, no complicated social dynamics, just the two of them against the elements. "What are you thinking?" Julian asked, coming up behind her on the beach and wrapping his arms around her waist. Tessa leaned back against his chest. "That I am going to miss this. When we get rescued, I am going to miss this simplicity." "We can keep it simple," Julian murmured against her hair. "We do not have to go back to our old lives exactly as they were. You have a billion-dollar company to run. I have good people. I can delegate more, step back from the day-to-day operations." His arms tightened around her. "After this, spending 12 hours a day in conference rooms seems pointless. I want to live, Tess, really live, and I want to do it with you." Tessa turned in his embrace, looking up at him. The tropical sun had bronzed his skin, lightened his hair. He looked younger, more relaxed than he probably had in years. "Are you sure?" In a month, when you are back in New York and I am just the waitress from the yacht, will you still feel this way?" Julian cupped her face in both hands. "You were never just anything, and yes, I am sure. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you, Tessa Owens." Tears spilled down Tessa's cheeks. "I love you too." They kissed, surrounded by the sound of waves and wind, sealing the promise they were making. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The rescue came on day 38, sudden and overwhelming. Tessa was gathering firewood when she heard the sound, distant but unmistakable. A helicopter. She ran to the beach screaming for Julian, already grabbing handfuls of green palm fronds to throw on the signal fire. Julian emerged from the trees and caught sight of the helicopter, his face transforming with shock and relief. They fed the fire frantically, black smoke rising in thick plumes. The helicopter circled once, twice, then began to descend, landing on the beach in a whirlwind of sand and noise. Two men jumped out, rescue workers in orange vests shouting questions. Were they hurt? How long had they been here? Were there others? Julian handled the questions with his usual efficiency while Tessa stood frozen, suddenly overwhelmed. This was real. Rescue was real. They were going home. One of the rescue workers draped a blanket around her shoulders. "You are safe now, miss. We will get you to a hospital, checked out properly." Tessa nodded numbly. Julian reached for her hand and she grabbed on like a lifeline. Everything was moving so fast. The helicopter, the noise, the strangers. After weeks of just the two of them, it was sensory overload. The flight to the main island of the Philippines took less than an hour. A hospital, doctors, police asking questions about the yacht explosion. Julian never left her side, his presence the only thing keeping her grounded. They learned that the yacht explosion had been caused by a mechanical failure, a tragic accident. The crew and other passengers had made it to the lifeboat and were rescued 2 days after the incident. Everyone assumed Julian and Tessa had gone down with the ship. The search had been called off after a week. 38 days, the doctor said, shaking his head in amazement. "You two are incredibly lucky." Luck, Tessa thought. Was that what this was? It felt like so much more. The hospital kept them overnight for observation. Tessa lay in a real bed with real sheets staring at the ceiling. Down the hall, Julian was in his own room, probably also unable to sleep. She felt his absence like a physical ache. Near midnight, her door opened quietly. Julian slipped inside, closing it behind him. He looked strange in a hospital gown, his feet bare on the linoleum. "Could not sleep either," Tessa whispered. "Bed is too soft, room is too quiet, you were not there." He climbed into the narrow hospital bed beside her, and Tessa shifted to make room. They lay tangled together, finally relaxing. "This is against hospital policy," Tessa murmured. "Add it to the list of rules I have broken since meeting you," Julian said, kissing her temple. In the morning, reality crashed in. Julian's assistant arrived, a severe-looking woman named Patricia who nearly fainted when she saw him alive. Phone calls were made, arrangements set in motion. The media had gotten wind of the story. Billionaire Julian Warner, missing and presumed dead, found alive on a remote island. "We need to control the narrative," Patricia said, pacing the hospital room with her phone. "Press conference, carefully managed interviews. Your shareholders have been panicking, Julian." The company's stock dropped 15%. Tessa watched Julian slip back into his billionaire persona, the relaxed man from the island disappearing behind a mask of professional competence. It hurt, even though she understood it was necessary. "Schedule the press conference for tomorrow," Julian said. "Give me time to process everything. And Patricia, I need you to do something else. Anything. Tessa needs clothes, toiletries, anything she requires. Put it on my personal account." and book her a suite at whatever hotel I am staying in." Patricia's gaze flicked to Tessa, assessment in her eyes. "Of course, I will handle it." When she left, Julian turned to Tessa. "I am sorry. I know this is overwhelming." "It is your life," Tessa said, trying to sound understanding. "I get it. It is our life now," Julian corrected. "If you want it to be." Before Tessa could respond, a nurse entered to discharge them. The moment was lost in paperwork and logistics. The hotel was obscenely luxurious, the kind of place Tessa had only ever seen from the service entrance. Her suite was bigger than the apartment she had shared in Manila. All marble and gold fixtures, and a view of the ocean that made her heart ache. Julian was on a different floor, surrounded by assistants and lawyers and people demanding his attention. Tessa tried not to feel abandoned. He had responsibilities, a massive company that had been without its leader for over a month. Of course, he was busy, but by the third day, she had barely seen him except in passing. He sent texts apologizing, promising they would talk soon, but there was always another meeting, another crisis to manage. Tessa felt the island slipping away from them, the connection they had built getting buried under the weight of his real life. She wandered the hotel, restless and out of place in the expensive clothes Patricia had bought her. She did not belong in this world of wealth and power. On the fourth night, unable to take it anymore, she went to Julian's suite and knocked. He answered looking exhausted, his tie loosened, shirt wrinkled. "Tess, I am so sorry. I have been meaning to come see you, but everything is chaos and—" He trailed off at her expression. "What is wrong? Is this going to work?" Tessa asked bluntly. "Us. Because right now it feels like the island was a dream and this is reality, and I do not know how to fit into your reality." Julian pulled her inside, closing the door on the assistants working in the suite's living room. He led her to the bedroom, the only private space, and shut that door too. "I am terrified of the same thing," he admitted. "I love you, Tess. That has not changed, but I do not know how to balance this life with what I want. My entire world is demanding I return to exactly who I was before, and I do not want to be that person anymore." "Then do not be," Tessa said. "You are Julian Warner. You control a pharmaceutical empire. If you cannot set your own terms, who can?" He looked at her for a long moment, then started to laugh. "You are right. I have been operating on autopilot, letting Patricia and the board dictate my schedule, but that ends now." Julian pulled out his phone and made a call. "Patricia, clear my schedule for the next week. Everything. Reschedule it or delegate it, I do not care which. I am taking time off." He paused, listening to her protests. "No, this is not negotiable. I have been back 4 days. I am entitled to some recovery time. Make it happen." He hung up and turned to Tessa with a genuine smile, the first she had seen since the rescue. "There, now I am all yours." Just like that. Tessa felt lighter already. Just like that. I run the company, not the other way around. Time I remembered that. He pulled her close. "I am sorry I got swept up in everything. I am still figuring out how to integrate my old life with the man I became on that island." "We will figure it out together," Tessa said. They spent the next week exploring the Philippines properly, just the two of them. Julian had security following at a discreet distance, but otherwise they were alone. They visited beaches, hiked through jungles, ate street food and stayed in local hotels instead of luxury resorts. "This is more like it," Julian said, sitting on a simple beach at sunset, his feet in the sand. "I do not need 5-star accommodations, I just need you." Tessa leaned against his shoulder. "What happens when we go back to New York? Your life is there." "So move to New York," Julian said simply. "Or we could move somewhere else entirely. I can run the company from anywhere with an internet connection." "Where do you want to live, Tess?" The question took her breath away. "You would move for me. I would do anything for you. He turned to face her fully. The last month taught me what matters, not money or status or corporate success. Connection matters. Love matters. You matter more than anything else. Tessa felt tears building. I want to go back to school, finish my marine biology degree. Then we find the best program and you enroll. I will support you however you need. And I do not want to be dependent on you financially, Tessa continued. I know you want to help, but I need to maintain my independence. Julian nodded seriously. Fair enough. How about this? I will cover your tuition as a gift, because I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes and education matters to me. But you handle your own living expenses, your own spending money. When you finish your degree and start your career, we are equals contributing to our shared life. The thought of a shared life, a future together, made Tessa's heart soar. That sounds perfect. Then it is settled. Julian pulled a small box from his pocket. Tessa's breath caught. What is that? I bought it this morning. Probably too soon, definitely too fast, but I do not care. He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. Tessa Owens, will you marry me? Not because of who I am or what I have, but because we survived an island together and I cannot imagine surviving life without you. Tessa launched herself at him, knocking them both back into the sand. Yes, yes, of course yes. They kissed as the sun set, the ocean waves providing a soundtrack, and Tessa felt the last of her fears melt away. This was real. This was happening. They were building a life together. The engagement made headlines, of course. Billionaire Julian Warner marrying the waitress from the yacht. The media tried to make it a fairy tale or a scandal, depending on the outlet. Tessa ignored most of it, focusing instead on the practical steps of building their future. She enrolled at Columbia University to finish her marine biology degree, moving into an apartment near campus that she insisted on paying for herself with the settlement she received from the yacht company. Julian bought a penthouse in Manhattan but spent most of his time at her small apartment, saying it felt more like home. He restructured his company, promoting trusted executives and stepping back from day-to-day operations. He focused instead on the medical charity he started, building a hospital system that provided free care in underserved areas. The first hospital opened in the Philippines, on the main island near where they were rescued. Full circle, Tessa said at the opening ceremony, watching Julian cut the ribbon. Everything comes full circle eventually, Julian agreed. This is what I should have been doing all along. They married a year after the island, a small ceremony on a private beach in Oregon with just close friends and family. Tessa's mother cried through the entire ceremony, unable to believe her wandering daughter had found such happiness. He is good for you, her mother told her at the reception. You have stopped running. I found something worth staying for, Tessa replied, watching Julian laugh with her cousins. She finished her degree while he built his hospital network. They traveled constantly, splitting time between New York, Oregon, and the Philippines. They visited the island once, 2 years after their rescue, and stood on the beach holding hands. Still the best 38 days of my life, Julian said. Mine too, Tessa agreed. Everything I have now started here. 3 years after the island, Tessa got her doctorate and started working for a marine conservation nonprofit. 5 years after, their first child was born, a daughter they named Marina. 7 years after, a son they named River. Julian continued his medical charity work, his pharmaceutical company now funding research into diseases that affected the poor, not just the profitable conditions. He was happier, more fulfilled than he had ever been running the company his father built. They bought a house in the Pacific Northwest, right on the ocean, with a private beach where their children could play. The kids grew up hearing the story of how their parents fell in love on a deserted island, surviving on instinct and determination. "Tell us again," Marina would beg at bedtime. And Tessa would recount those 38 days, the fear and struggle, the gradual falling in love, the moment rescue came. Julian would add details she forgot, and together they would paint the picture of how two strangers became partners, lovers, a family. "The island was my anchor," Julian told an interviewer years later, when asked about his transformation from ruthless businessman to philanthropist. "It grounded me, showed me what actually mattered. But more specifically, Tessa was my anchor. She kept me steady when everything was chaos." She still does. Tessa read the interview from their home office, smiling. In the living room, Julian was building a fort with the kids, his laughter echoing through the house. This was the life they built from nothing, starting with a shipwreck and ending with everything that mattered. She thought about the scared waitress who swam toward a dark island, not knowing what waited in the darkness. She thought about the billionaire who discovered he was not just his father's legacy or his company's net worth. They had both survived on instinct, but more than that, they had learned to survive together. And in learning to survive, they learned to live. Tessa closed her laptop and went to join her family, stepping over pillow cushions and blankets to sit beside Julian. He pulled her close automatically, their daughter climbing into her lap while their son continued engineering a more complex roof structure. "I was thinking," Julian said quietly, for her ears only, "maybe we take the kids camping this summer. Real camping, not glamping. Teach them survival skills." "Are you sure you want to relive our trauma?" Tessa teased. "It was not trauma. It was the beginning of everything good in my life." He kissed her temple. "Besides, the kids should know how to make fire without matches. Important life skill." Tessa laughed, imagining their children trying to rub sticks together. "Only if we bring matches as backup. Deal?" Marina looked up at them. "Are you talking about the island again?" "Always the island," Julian said. "It is where I found your mother." "And where I found myself," Tessa added. River abandoned his fort building to climb onto Julian's lap. "Can we go to the island?" "Maybe when you are older," Julian said. "Right now, it is time for someone to go to bed." The kids groaned but did not resist too much as Tessa herded them toward their rooms. Bedtime routine, stories, kisses, nightlights. The comfortable rhythm of family life. Later, after the children were asleep, Tessa and Julian stood on their deck overlooking the Pacific. The ocean stretched dark and infinite before them, waves crashing against the rocks below. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we had not made it to the island?" Tessa asked. "If we had drowned in the swim, sometimes," Julian admitted. "But then I remember we did make it. Against odds, against logic, we survived, and we found each other in the process." "That is not luck, Tess. That is fate." "I do not believe in fate," Tessa said. "Neither did I. But how else do you explain two people from completely different worlds ending up stranded together, falling in love, and building this incredible life?" He gestured to the house behind them, their sleeping children inside. "If that is not fate, I do not know what is." Tessa leaned her head on his shoulder. "Maybe you are right, or maybe we just got really lucky." "Lucky works too," Julian said. "Either way, I am grateful every single day." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the ocean that had tried to kill them and ended up giving them everything. The moon rose over the water, painting silver paths across the waves. Somewhere out there was their island, tiny and remote, where two scared people had learned to be brave together. Tessa thought about the woman she had been, always running, never settling. She thought about the man Julian had been, trapped by expectations and his father's legacy. The island had stripped all that away, leaving only their essential selves. And those selves had recognized each other, connected in a way that went deeper than circumstance or background. She would always be grateful for the shipwreck. It had seemed like the end, but turned out to be the beginning. It had brought her Julian, brought her home, brought her the life she had been searching for all along without knowing it. "I love you," she said, the words as natural as breathing. "I love you too," Julian replied, holding her close. "My anchor." "Your anchor," Tessa agreed. Behind them, the house was warm and bright, full of the family they had built together. Before them, the ocean rolled eternal, powerful and dangerous and beautiful. They stood at the intersection of past and present, remembering where they came from, grateful for where they were. The island had taught them survival, but more importantly, it had taught them how to live, how to love, how to be truly present with another person. Those lessons stayed with them long after the rescue, shaping every decision, every moment. Marina appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "I had a bad dream." Tessa turned, opening her arms. "Come here, baby." Their daughter ran to them, and they both wrapped her in a hug, sheltering her between them. Julian lifted her up, and they went inside together, leaving the ocean and the memories behind for the night. But the memories never really left. They were woven into every part of their lives, the foundation their family was built on. 38 days that changed everything, that taught them what really mattered: survival, love, partnership, trust, building something from nothing, facing fear together. Those were the gifts the island gave them, gifts they would carry forward for the rest of their lives. And if sometimes Tessa woke in the night, hearing phantom waves crash against sand, Julian was always there to hold her, reminding her they were safe. Just as she grounded him when his dreams took him back to corporate boardrooms and his father's disappointment, they anchored each other, had from the very beginning. And they would continue to do so, through whatever storms life brought, for all the years to come. Their love story had started with a shipwreck and desperation, but it transformed into something beautiful, something lasting. They had survived on instinct, yes, but they had thrived on love, and that made all the difference.